Our next speaker is Nonohe Botelho, and she's with Parents of Murdered Children, which is in some ways a little different than the other groups that are speaking tonight. And I originally didn't think that that kind of fit, but I went to a rally a couple weeks ago at the state capitol. I think it's the first one they had of parents whose children had been murdered, not mainly by the police, but some by the police. The people there spoke so movingly about what had happened and the way they were treated by the injustice system, even as victims. The tears were running down people's faces because they talked about how they had been disrespected. They were all Hawaiians and people of color. I think they were all actually Hawaiian. And they talked about how they had been disrespected through the interrogation, how one of them hadn't even been allowed to be at the verdict when the murder of her sons was read because they were afraid there would be some outburst from the family. Inhumane. And so I asked Nonohe to come down and talk about this new group in Hawaii, Parents of Murdered Children, and some of her own experience. Nonohe?
Mahalo for having me here. And it is a little bit different as I'm sitting there listening. My name is Nonohe Napoleon Botelho. I come from a very strong family of activists, Hawaiian activists. I became affiliated with Parents of Murdered Children because I became a parent of a murdered child. My son was 27, Joel Botelho, played high school football at Castle High School. 2011, he was murdered in my front yard by a classmate. My son was not living here. He was living in Waimea. He was home visiting for his birthday on January 1st. He was murdered January 2nd after he turned 27. My son was not only murdered, he was executed by the shooter, who was a longtime friend of his. They went to school together. Brother slept at my house. Brother ate at my house. He, for all intents and purposes, called me auntie. He was high on drugs. He was armed. Joel was not armed. Joel tried to talk him down. But instead, the shooter told my son to get on his knees and beg for his life, at which point my son did get down on his knees, but he didn't beg for his life. He said, if you, brother, need to shoot somebody, shoot me. He did shoot my son while my son was on his knees, point blank range, killed him instantly. We were all there. I did not see my son get shot, but I heard it. I became affiliated with Parents of Murdered Children because I could not find resources here. I worked with the prosecutor's office for 6 years. I sat through many, many murder trials. And until it happened to me, I did not realize the intensity of what I was to face for the following 2 years. I learned through our experience that first-degree murder in the state of Hawaii, is reserved for a certain class of people. How many of you here are judges? How many of you here are police officers or in law enforcement? How many are here that are witnesses or what they call hired killer? First-degree murder in the state of Hawaii is reserved for these people. If you are a judge and you are shot and killed, the defendant will face first-degree murder with the penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. But if you execute somebody who is unarmed, it's second-degree murder. If you dismember someone in a case in 2010 and burn their body, it's second-degree murder. If in Kollin Elderts case, I followed that case from the beginning and been with that family from the very beginning. I've been through both trials. if that situation was turned and Kollin actually turned the gun and the gun went off and shot Agent Didi, Kollin would be facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because it was a law enforcement agent. We are, as parents of murdered children, a small group. We don't want to be part of our group. We are moving to have legislation. We have legislation in now to reform our murder laws. Because while we were a territory in the Penal Code, Hawaii Kingdom recognized each and every one of us as valuable people in this community. The law no longer recognizes one person as valuable. You must be a judge, you must be a law enforcement agent, you must be any one of those certain class of people. Dismemberment is not enough. Rape, strangulation is not enough. Execution is not enough. Beheading is not enough. What is enough? When do we become valuable? I cried out for something for pu'uhonua, for ho'oponopono. Because the community, when my son was murdered, my son was beloved in our community. In fact, Hawaiian Memorial said besides Gabi Pahinui, my son's funeral was the second largest funeral they ever had there. I cried out for peace in our community, for restoration, for ho'oponopono. We had nothing. We had nothing. We need pu'uhonua. Now, we need before these things happen. Before as prevention, where do we go as Hawaiians? I prayed to God. Before I found out that the shooter actually executed my son, I prayed grace be on him. Poor brother. I knew him like a nephew. Does his life really, what is it going to do to incarcerate him? Is he going to be reformed? Hell no. Is he going to come out worse? Probably. Is that what should happen to this young man? In my heart, on my good day, in my highest being, I said, no. This is no good, even for the person that murdered my son. Can there be another way? We tried to negotiate. We tried. The prosecutor's office said no. It's all or nothing. The boy is spending 40 years, this young man now. I have mixed feelings, of course, any parent would. He never apologized. His family never apologized. This is a boy that called me auntie. We need Hawaiians to work with Hawaiians because we understand the language, we understand the mana, we understand the na'au, the groaning deep inside of us to see our young men incarcerated and murdered, murdering each other. We are moving to reform the murder laws in the state of Hawaii so that one life is valuable in the law. And we go back to our roots to find that. And that is my journey now as a parent of a murdered child. Thank you for having me. I didn't know how this was going to fit, but I hope it made sense. Thank you.